welcome. I'm Rachel Scheinerman, the editor of My Jewish Learning, and I am so pleased to welcome you all today to learn about demons in the Talmud. I would venture to say that a lot of people, when they first study the Talmud, or even if they've been studying it for a while, might not even know that demons pop up occasionally in its pages. So today we are super lucky to have Dr. Sarah Ronis, the Associate Professor of Theology at St. Mary's University in Texas, to orient us to some of this surprising material. She's one of the world's experts on the topic of demons in the Talmud, and the culmination of her research, a book called Demons in the Details, Demonic Discourse and Rabbinic Culture in Late Antique Babylonia, just came out a few months ago. So if you like what you learn here and want to learn more, please feel free to check it out. I believe we'll have a link for a discount that we can offer in the follow-up to this course. So now I'm going to turn the virtual microphone over to you, Dr. Ronis.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm so thrilled that you're spending your lunch hour or breakfast hour or dinner hour, depending on where you are, coming to learn about demons with me. If at some point I cut out or the tech is wonky, please let me know. And also the wonderful folks from My Jewish Learning will be monitoring the chat. So if something in one of the Talmudic texts is confusing, you're not sure what's going on in them, please raise your hand, drop it in the chat, and they'll interrupt me as we're going. So I have a PowerPoint I'm going to share with you all. My advice would be to go to speaker view. But at this point, 3 years in, you can do Zoom however you want to do Zoom. So today we're going to talk about demons in the Talmud. And one thing that I want everyone to know is that basically almost everyone in the late antique world in what is today North Africa, Asia, and Europe believed in demons. Modern American culture usually depicts demons the way that they are presented primarily in the New Testament. And so I bet you are surprised that we're starting our My Jewish Learning journey together by looking at the New Testament, but there we go. Right, so in the New Testament, demons are depicted as evil, malevolent. They attack the body by entering. Right, they attack humans by entering into our bodies and basically taking it over. And in fact, one of the first things that establishes Jesus's reputation in his lifetime is his ability to successfully exorcise demonic beings and force them out of human bodies. Now, that construction of demons is the construction of demons that we see in modern films. And I could have kept going, but I know, at some point we want to talk about other things, right? All of these texts depict demons as these horrible, malevolent beings that need to be exorcised. So if you were thinking demons in the Talmud, oh, I know what demons are, this is probably where many of us, our minds go. But not everybody in the ancient world thought about demons as evil body snatchers. And in the book that Dr. Scheinerman was already named, I examine how the Babylonian rabbis think about demons really differently. Right? It turns out if we ask, how does this one specific group who is so important to modern Judaism, how do they think about demons? Our answer is going to be really different from the answer we would be getting if we were asking that question about the New Testament or about the modern exorcist. So before we can talk about demons in the Talmud, I want to make sure we're all on the same page about the Talmud. So the Talmud is sort of the classic late antique text of a group called the rabbis. The rabbis who wrote the Babylonian Talmud lived in Babylonia. I know, we're very good at naming things. And if you look at this map that I put up on the screen, you will see an area a very small area in the orange called Babylonia. Babylonia was a province in the Sasanian Empire. The Sasanian Empire in late antiquity, and I'm saying late antiquity a lot, so just for context, I'm really thinking here about the 2nd to 6th centuries CE. So, you know, the 100s through the 500s. And Babylonia is part of the Sasanian Empire. The empire is controlled by a Zoroastrian elite. Zoroastrians still exist today. And in this time, we would have called them a dualistic religion coming out of what is today Iran. But this empire, and specifically the region of Babylonia, also had Jews, rabbinic and otherwise, different kinds of Christians, Manichaeans, Mandeans, people who still worshipped ancient Sumerian and Akkadian gods and goddesses. And so we're thinking about a really cosmopolitan, diverse, religiously rich environment. So that's the place where, and I think you should be able to see my cursor now. Just if you haven't been able to notice Babylonia on the map, it's right where I'm pointing. Can you see my cursor? Yes. Okay. Thanks, Rahel. So it's that little region there. And the rabbis are only one religious elite among many in this world. And on top of all of the kinds of interactions they're having with their peers, they also are the inheritors of earlier Jewish traditions from Second Temple Judaism, the Bible, the Mishnah, and other Jewish traditions. So today, I want to take you through how this one group in this one place in this one time explores the demons. And I want to do 3 things with you in our time together. First, I want to show you how the rabbis integrate demons into the world of rabbinic law by integrating them into the rabbinic legal system. They become all kinds of interesting players in the rabbinic legal system. Then I want to show you how, when the rabbis do that weird integration, it actually changes what it means to be a demon at all for the rabbis. And we'll think about how the rabbis' change really functioned as part of how the rabbis think about what it means to be a community at all. And then finally, because I started with exorcism and I know that today is Halloween, we are going to end by looking at the only story in the Babylonian Talmud about rabbinic exorcism. And I think we're going to be real surprised by that particular story in ways that are going to be interesting and tell us more about how the rabbis think about the body, the self, and how they relate to others. So that's our plan for today. Rachel, any questions that I need to address before we move on?
I don't know if this is good for the beginning or the end, but we had a question about whether the Yerushalmi, the other Talmud, the one composed in the land of Israel, has demons in it. Do they function the same way, or is this a purely Babylonian phenomenon?
Amazing, great question. So the rabbis in what was at the time the Roman Empire in the province of Roman Palestine, the rabbis there also had an extensive demonology. It shows up a little bit in the Palestinian Talmud, the Yerushalmi. It shows up a lot more in exegetical works, various midrashim that come out of the land of Israel. The rabbis in Babylonia only really write one text. Now, to be fair, it's 73 volumes, so I don't want to make you think that they were slacking. But because they only have sort of one major textual corpus, they end up putting all of that stuff in the same Talmud. So the rabbis in Roman Palestine, things are different and the same, all at the same time. I know. But the stuff that we're looking at here, I want to just be clear, takes any seeds that are planted in the Palestinian literature and grows them enormously. So we're seeing this really, really amplified in a lot of ways. Great question. So so I called this talk Demons in the Talmud, and we've talked extensively about what the Talmud is and where it was written and a little bit about who wrote it. I want to make sure before we move on that we also understand the other term in the talk title, which is the term demons. Because you might be thinking to yourself, well, if Sarah's saying that they do something really different, maybe we shouldn't use that word. I'm so glad you asked. So when we think about how to define demons, especially when they're so different, I want to just do an on one foot explanation of what the modern English word demon is and isn't. So the modern English word demon comes from the Greek daimon, and a daimon was a god or a goddess or some kind of spirit who took care of a community or a city or a family or a person. In the Latin, pre-Christian Latin, it becomes a phrase for the indwelling spirit or genius, right? So my personal daimon is leading me to, I don't know, do something awesome. Are you hearing feedback?
I'm working on it.
Okay, totally fine. And then in post-classical Latin and the early Christian fathers, that's where we start to see the Greek daimon become the Latin daemon, which becomes a demon, meaning an evil spirit, a false god, or an idol, right? That's where that comes in. Now, the rabbis don't use any of those terms. Instead, the rabbis use three terms, ruchot, mazikin, and shedim, which mean different things. So ruchot means spirits, mazikin means harmers, and shedim comes from the Akkadian shedu, who is a positive spirit. But the rabbis use them interchangeably. So if you're trying to track, well, this one means this, and this one means this, and this one means that, unfortunately, and I have tried, I made all the charts back in the day. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work. So they really do seem to be using those terms interchangeably. Now, just to make this extra complicated, the Syriac Christians, Mandeans, other non-Jewish groups in Babylonia use these terms as well. And for them, they always mean evil things. And just to make this extra complicated, so the Zoroastrians at this time period spoke a language called Pahlavi, which is sort of ancient Farsi. And Pahlavi does this really interesting things where sometimes it spells a word one way and it's pronounced a completely different way as part of an interesting linguistic shift. If we have linguists in the room, look this up later. It's fascinating. But Pahlavi spells their word for evil intermediary beings, as I put in capital letters here, but they pronounce it div. So it's spelled the same way as the Akkadian shade. It's pronounced div, which is the root of the modern word devil. So clearly, there is some kind of shared culture of language around intermediary beings. That's just a fancy way to say things that are more powerful than humans and less powerful than the ultimate deity. Right, fancy term, intermediary beings. And for everybody in the time period of the rabbis who isn't the rabbis, all of those whole clusters refer to evil beings. But I think if we look at this, right, so just take a step back, it's real complicated, right? I mean, yes. But in English, most people translate all of these terms relatively uncomplicatedly as demon. And that obscures a lot of this complexity, right? In fact, the history of the term itself, as you can see just from this one slide, really embraces that complexity and erases how different cultures and theologies and communities really see these things as different. I want to argue that, as we can see, the word demon itself kind of does embrace that complexity if you understand this context. And I'm going to translate all three of those terms in rabbinic texts, ruchot, shedim, and mazikin, as demons, in part really because what I want to do is emphasize how the rabbis are taking a shared term and defining it totally differently, right? So it's not that they've got a different category and they're having a different conversation. They're using the exact same words as Manichaeans and Zoroastrians and Christians at the time, and doing something completely different with that term, which to me is what makes it so interesting. My Jewish learning folks, any questions about that? I feel like that's a lot of linguistic stuff.
No linguistic questions.
Awesome.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So let's start talking about the Talmud. So the 10th chapter of Tractate Psachim deals with the laws of the ritual meal on the first night of Passover, which today we call the Passover Seder. Now, if you've ever been to a Seder, you may have noticed that the Seder involves drinking 4 cups of wine. We get that from an earlier rabbinic text called the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is a 2nd century rabbinic text from Roman Palestine that the Babylonian Talmud essentially frames itself as a commentary upon. And here, the Mishnah is what tells us that we need to have 4 cups of wine. Now, right, in fact, I'll read the first line for you. One should have no fewer than 4 cups of wine. Amazing. Now, if you are familiar at all with rabbinic literature, you might expect that later rabbis are going to ask a lot of questions about that Mishnah. And some things I might want to know, how big do the cups of wine have to be? Does it have to be alcoholic wine? Do I have to drink the whole cup of wine? Can it be white wine or red wine, or do you care? Can I water the wine down if I can't handle 4 cups? Right? There's all kinds of questions I would want to know. The very first question that the rabbis of the Talmud ask, however, is not any of those. Right? The rabbis of the Talmud, that's not where they're starting. They actually start in a very different place. And that's the next line on the slide. How could our rabbis institute something that would ultimately lead to danger? For surely it was taught in an earlier tradition. One should not eat in even numbers or drink in even numbers, nor wipe himself in even numbers, nor fulfill his sexual needs in even numbers. Okay, so just to unpack that, the rabbis are assuming everybody knows, right? Everybody knows that doing something an even number of times, whether it is eating and drinking or whether it is something far more intimate, is something that ultimately leads to danger. They don't tell us what the danger is, but we all know, obviously, that it's incredibly dangerous. And that's a problem because you have to drink 4 cups of wine on Passover. And if you think back to sort of 2nd grade or 1st grade, whenever you learn this, 4 is an even number, right? So that's our problem. Okay, so then we get a fantastic answer from Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who says, it is a night that is guarded. He's quoting Exodus 12, where we're talking about the Exodus from Egypt. And he interprets this verse from Exodus as saying, it is a night that is guarded from the demons. Whew. Okay. So essentially, what Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak's answer tells us is, what is it about even numbers that's so dangerous? It's demons. Even numbers in some way provoke demonic aggression. But you don't have to worry on the first night of Passover, because on that night, when God says in Exodus, I am guarding you on this night, it is a it is a night that is guarded. For perpetuity, on the very first night of Passover, God protects us from demons, and you can have your 4 cups of wine. Now, I want to be really clear. The rabbis aren't concerned about you getting drunk. In fact, a really easy way to avoid this problem would have been to have 5 cups of wine. They really are concerned about demons. And they really do carve out an exception for the first night of Passover based on their reading of Exodus. Now, the passage in Pesachim is going to continue with other Talmudic rabbis trying to resolve the conflict in different ways. So one rabbi is going to say, oh, no, it's not 4 cups. It's 3 cups and then 1 cup, which is 2 odd numbers. Another rabbi is going to say, no. It's not 4 cups. It's 1 cup and 1 cup and 1 cup and 1 cup. And 1 is an even number. But I think we can see that all of the rabbis, right? They're all agree. Nobody says, whoa, even numbers don't cause demonic harm. They all agree that even numbers cause demons to respond negatively. But for strictly legal and biblical interpretation reasons, on the first night of Passover, you can have 4 cups safely. Now, the flip side of that, right? Let's go with the 3+1 model, okay? If we think it's not 4 cups, it's 3 cups and then 1 cup, well, I think it's worth noting that only works if the demons also follow rabbinic math. Because I don't know about you, but if I was looking at 3+1, I would say, well, going back to first grade, that sounds like 4 to me. But for the rabbis, they are seeing a world in which their complicated math saves people from demonic harm because demons do the same math. And that's kind of interesting. So I want to keep moving unless we have comprehension questions about this text.
We have an interesting question about Elijah's cup. Is that there to break the even number of cups? So we have 5 on the table?
There are a couple of scholars who have argued that is exactly what Elijah's cup is doing. Yeah.
And
not everybody.
And when it comes to the even number of cups, is the danger in something about symmetry? Does it have to do with symmetry, do you think? Do we think?
Great question. So one thing that I will say is that we have no other religious tradition at this time believes that even numbers provoke demons. The rabbis are not getting this from anybody else. This seems to be an internal rabbinic belief. But they never tell us why. In fact, in one place they do tell us why, and what they tell us is, well, God told Moses at Sinai that this was demonically provocative. That's the reason, because God said so. Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that this conversation in Pesachim continues for like 10 pages of the Talmud. And again, anyone who's done any Talmud, that's a really long time for a single sustained conversation on a specific topic to happen. The Talmud is famous for expansively exploring in a bunch of different directions. And throughout that whole discussion, I want to be really clear about this. The rabbis aren't just telling stories about demons, right? This isn't folk tales. These aren't, to quote my grandmother, these aren't Baba Maisa's old wives' tales. These are legal discussions about how to live in a world that has demons, right? And that's a real concern for them. So,
and now, as our chat is pointing out, those who add the modern custom of Miriam's cup might be again provoking demons with the 6th cup. But then again, it's water, points out another participant, so maybe not.
Well, I want you to know the Talmud addresses that, and it only adds up if it's the same substance.
Well, there you go. Miriam's cup is safe, folks.
Yeah. Whew. Okay. So here we're imagining a world where the rabbis control demons through the law. And of course, as we've already said, that assumes that that demons know rabbinic law, right? That demons can do rabbinic math. Demons can know, oh, well, no, tonight's the calendar night, so we can't. Which raises this question, so then are the rabbis imagining a world in which demons are really part of the rabbinic legal system? And I want to look at this text from Chulin, another tractate in the Talmud, because I think it's going to really answer that question for us in ways that surprise us. Certain porters were once carrying a barrel of wine. Wanting to rest, they placed the barrel under a rain spout. The barrel burst. They went before Mar Barav Ashi, and he banned the demon. Okay, so just to unpack a little bit what's happening so far. Obviously, again, right, the number of things that these texts assume everyone knows is high, but obviously, demons live under rain spouts. And obviously, they're also probably invisible, or can be. So what happens? These people are carrying this heavy barrel of wine. They put it on top of a demon who is clearly very unhappy about this. And they go to the rabbi of the town, and he essentially excommunicates the demon. Okay. The demon came before Mar Barav Ashi and said to him, "What should I have done to those men? For they placed the barrel on my ear." Mar Barav Ashi said to him, "Even so, in a place where people are commonplace, you did not have the right. You acted improperly. Now go and pay for the barrel of wine." The demon said to him, "I do not have the money. Set a date on which I will pay." He set a date, but the demon did not come on that day to pay for the barrel. Uh-oh. When he came at a later date, Mar Barav Ashi said to him, "Why did you not come on time?" The demon said to him, "We have no right to take anything that is tied, sealed, collected, or counted. So we can only take things that are in a state of ownerlessness, and therefore it took me longer to collect the money." Okay. So I want to turn to you guys now, and I want to ask, what do you notice about this text? What jumps out at you about this text?
I think folks are still having trouble wrapping their brain around what they should imagine a demon to be. Are they always invisible? Let me see. Someone saying, is this an ethical demon that's unusual? Are they usually ethical? Is this unusual? I think there's a lot about this that surprises them.
So again, I want to be really clear about a couple of things because this opens that up for us. One, the rabbis think demons are real. They're not a metaphor for something, right? This is a real demon with a real ear. Two, demons have bodies, right? This demon has an ear. And this demon is three-dimensional, but presumably, at least in part, invisible. So one thing that the rabbis tend to think throughout the Talmud is that demons can change what they look like. They could be invisible, they could make themselves visible. So this demon is chilling, presumably invisible, but embodied under this wine spout, or under this rain spout, excuse me. And then when the guys put the barrel on his ear, he gets mad because even if he's invisible, he still has ears and nobody would want to do that. Does that help?
Sorry, the comments are now coming in a little faster than I can read them.
Yeah.
But people do seem to be remarking on how much the demons are in some ways like people in terms of their ethics. They carry money, they can chat, but they're also invisible, but you can also have a conversation with the demon, or at least the rabbi can. And they seem to be bound by rabbinic rules and care about rabbinic rules, which is something that people are commenting on a lot. And there's one interesting question here about whether all of this is, we're meant to hear this a little bit as mocking demons and the concept of demons, that they have been so domesticated. They're just invisible creatures that listen to the rabbis. Is this mocking a concept of demon that's in the culture and domesticating, subduing it? Could that be what's going on in this case?
Yeah, great question. I don't necessarily think that they are mocking demons. I do think, though, that they're definitely saying, as so many of you are pointing out, that they are imagining a world in which demons are part of the community. I see a couple of hands, so let's pick two hands and then we'll move on. And Rachel, I'm going to let you navigate.
Okay. All right. Aljaya, I'm sorry, I'm probably slaughtering your name. I so apologize. You there? I've clicked the ask to unmute.
Okay, I did. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm getting out of this, and I could be completely off base, but what I'm getting out of this is if demons are actually subject to all the rules that humans are subject to and all of that stuff, though, then technically, how can a demon harm you unless you let a demon harm you? That's kind of the logical conclusion that I'm coming to. So in other words, if a demon cannot actually purposefully like do something evil to you because they're bound by the rules, then how is it supposed to harm you unless you let it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So I think it's fair to, if we look at a parallel to modern American law, we might think about the laws of self-defense. So the demon here, right, assuming that the demons are law-abiding, and this demon certainly sounds to be, you get a sense that this demon is just trying to defend himself, right? Like they literally put a barrel on his ear and he didn't hurt them, right? Let's be clear. Even when the porters put a barrel on his ear, he doesn't hurt the porters, he destroys the barrel. So that's kind of interesting. But even in modern American law, we are bound by the rules. And even if we assume that most people are different or don't follow all the rules all the time, you still have the right to self-defense. All right, let's go to one more and then we'll.
Okay, Barry.
Okay, so I know your topic is demons in the Talmud. So tell me if I'm off base here, but I'm thinking, my question is, how do the demons in the Talmud differ from Hasatan in the book of Job, the adversary in the book of Job?
Great.
Oh, that's good. And we're getting Lilith questions too. So why don't you roll Satan, demons, and Lilith all into the answer here,
So
Dr. Ronis.
That's my, I'm not using the chat. I'm just, because the chat is distracting me. But anyhow, so
yeah,
how, if any, does it differ from the Satan in the book of Job?
Yes. So the rabbis believe in a world with lots of different kinds of intermediary beings, right? Beings that are more powerful than humans and less powerful than God. And so that world has all kinds of different beings in it who are not the same. Here we might think about angels. We might think about Hasatan. For the rabbis, Satan and demons are never connected in the Talmud. It's a different thing. We have other kinds of intermediary beings. We might think here about something like the evil eye or the evil inclination. But all of those are different, right? Which makes sense. If we think about, the world today, there are, in fact, different species of beings that are different. And if God can create different species of natural beings, if we want to use that word, I don't love it, but for now, let's use that. Then why couldn't God create different species of supernatural beings? So they are connected in that they are all part of the divine world. They are not connected in any other way. Yeah. Actually, in the Talmud, Satan or Satan is much more connected oftentimes with angels than demons. Okay, so I want to just pull out one other thing from this text before we move on, and that is the ban. Because if anybody here is moving through Nidarim right now with Daf Yomi, you'll know the rabbis have all different kinds of excommunications that they perform for various kinds of transgressions. But here's one thing the rabbis never do. They never excommunicate a non-Jew. Why not? Literally in the English world, in the English word excommunicate is kick somebody out of the community that they are a part of. So here, when Marber of Ashi bans the demon, he tells us, well, this demon was a part of the community. And presumably, right, we get a sense that the demon says, I want to be a part of this community, right? I want to be a part of this community, which is why the demon doesn't say, hey, dude, they put it on my ear, tough luck. Instead, he says, I mean, I have to get you the money to pay the damages, but I also have to follow rabbinic law. Now, a couple of you have pointed out that the law for demons and the law for rabbis might be different. And that's okay, right? In our world today, we have certain kinds of rights and responsibilities for people who are over 18 and then over 21, and they're all people. So here too, we get a sense that the rabbis are creating law that applies to demons because demons are part of their community. Now, that doesn't mean demons are humans. In fact, they're not because they're invisible or could be, but it does already complicate for us this idea that demons are a shady other. Okay. Anything else on this text that we want to draw out my Jewish learning?
No, let's keep going.
Okay. So as hopefully we've started to see, integrating demons, letting demons be controlled by rabbinic law also changes a little bit what it means to be a demon. Because demons, absolutely, we saw already in the first text, demons can be dangerous, harmful, and even deadly, right? If you provoke demons, right, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it. But as we've also seen in this text, demons can also be members of the community in good standing and who want to be part of the community. And in one text, maybe even rabbis themselves. So I want to look at the same passage from Psachim that I told you had 10 pages. Let's look at another piece of it. Rabbi Papa said, Joseph the demon told me, for 2 we kill, for 4 we only harm. With 2 we punish, whether it was accidental or intentional. With 4, if it was accidental, no, but if it was intentional, yes. Okay, so what kinds of even numbered things are going to get you demon reactions? Okay, here, right, and apparently here, Joseph the demon, who is a demon and a rabbinic informant, seems to be telling us that demons differentiate between intentional and accidental transgression. But look, we've all been having a great conversation with some friends and lost track of how much we were drinking, right? It happens to everyone. And here I'm including water, right? Drinking anything. So what do you do if you go out and it turns out you actually drank an even number of drinks? So here's your one practical takeaway from today's conversation. If you happen to go out having drunk even numbers, hold your straight right arm in your left arm or sleeve and the left of in his right? So you're essentially doing this or possibly this, depending on which manuscript you're looking at. And you're turning your entire body into an odd number. Instead of having 2 arms and 2 legs, you have 3 limbs. And if that's not enough, let him say, you and I are 3. And if he hears someone say back, you and I are 4, let him say, no, you and I are 5. We are odd numbers. And if he hears someone say, you and I are 6, let him say, you and I are 7. This once happened, and when they reached 101, the demon burst. So here we have a Rabbi Papa, quoting a demon in the exact same way that he quotes his own rabbinic teachers. Though to be fair, right, if you wanted insight about the demonic world, who better would you ask? Now, I also want to point out something else. Very often, demons, when we think about demons in the ancient world, they have names that translate to things like sloth, gluttony, lust, wrath, right? In lots of different cultures at this time, demons' names translate to negative characteristics. This demon's name is Joseph. right? That's a solid biblical name, one of the 12 tribes, right? A very more, I would say, morally positive name, not even neutral, right? So,
and one the rabbis don't use all that much, right? For themselves and their children. Am I right about that?
there is a Rabbi Yosef
Yeah,
who shows up a lot.
Okay.
Yeah. But it is, right, again, I think this is another sign that the rabbis absolutely believe in demons and also think demons are not wrath and lust and sloth and gluttony and all of those. And in fact, right, I think what we see is at the end of this narrative that the demon's teaching gets put into practice and serves the test of time. So we have this demon who's teaching a rabbi something, which then becomes integrated into the rabbinic tradition. We actually meet this demon, Joseph the demon, in a bunch of other places. And I want to share another one of my favorites with you. And this is from Bavli Eruvin 43a, because if you could teach one rabbi, why not teach all of them? So who was it that taught 7 legal traditions on a Sabbath morning to Rav Chizda at Sura? Oh, ignore the typos. And on the same Sabbath evening to Rabbah at Pumbedita, which is a 40-hour walk. And just for context, the Sabbath is 25 hours. So there's no way to get from one to the other in the same Sabbath. But apparently the rabbis have a tradition that one person taught 7 legal teachings in both places on the same Shabbat. It is possible that the demon Joseph delivered them, right? So here, kind of thinking about when I Googled, I literally just Googled before this, person teaching Torah, where did it go? Well, apparently it's not here, but when I Googled that, what I got was a lot of pictures of older white men with beards giving a sermon. I think the algorithm is probably not wrong that many people, when we think somebody teaching Torah, we think rabbi, expert, at the very least human being. And here the rabbis are saying, well, maybe this guy teaching a class on something is Joseph the demon. Yeah, which is delightful, I think.
Is he the only one who could walk that far that fast? Is
well,
that why?
So here's what's really interesting is that the tradition, the piece in the dot that the dots that I left out, that is them debating whether it's Joseph the demon or Elijah the prophet. Because demons for the rabbis, can move rapidly can move in the places in the blink of an eye. And Elijah the prophet travels by fiery chariot that flying fiery chariot. But again, right.
Which is cool on Shabbat. You can ride your flying chariot if you're Elijah on Shabbat. That's cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
Totally fine. Totally fine. Travel only applies on the ground. But again, right, like what does it mean that the rabbis know that somebody taught this and their 2 options are Joseph the demon and Elijah the prophet? Because I think most people would say, oh, Elijah the prophet, like good dude, into him. Or if you've actually, read the books in which he appears, complicated dude, but clearly on the side of God. And here we have Joseph the demon, who is, maybe it's him and not Elijah, and maybe they serve a similar function, and that's kind of weird. So, yeah. So I want to look at one more story. I'm seeing in the chat a couple of people asking about Solomon. And
that's on my list too, to bring up to you. I think if people think about demons in Jewish tradition, Solomon and Asmodeus is often, and the temple is what comes to mind most frequently for people.
And that is where I want us to go. So at this point, hopefully what you've seen is that the rabbis integrate demons into rabbinic law. And when they do that, they turn demons into beings that could be subject to the rabbis and rabbinic courts, and could also participate in the rabbinic community as informants and as teachers. But they're not just subordinated to rabbis. So in this one story, the one that we've been sort of talking around, the hierarchy is actually overturned, and the demon becomes greater than the ultimate Torah scholar, King Solomon. So this is a story that centers on a demon named Ashmedai. Ashmedai shows up in a bunch of different ancient texts. He's not just in the rabbinic texts. Ashmedai shows up in Zoroastrian texts as Eshma Deva, which is just literally means wrath demon in Pahlavi. And he shows up in the extra canonical, right? So Jewish texts that didn't make it into the Bible, Tobit, as a lustful demon named Asmodeus. So in both of those, he's negative. Here, even though this one demon clearly sort of exists in all of these different spaces, we're going to see that the rabbinic depiction of him is really, really rabbinic. So let's take a look at it. And I didn't bring you the whole text. I'll tell the story. And I brought only some relevant pieces. So in 1 Kings, chapter 6, we learn that Solomon builds the temple and doesn't use any metal implements when he does. So the Talmud asks a super practical question, which is, right, like, how do you hew all of these giant stones without anything sharp? And the Talmud answers the question by telling a story where Solomon lived at the same time as the Sanhedrin, the high rabbinic court in Jerusalem. And he is looking for this mythical stone cutting thing called a shamir. And he doesn't know where it is because he wants to build the temple. He needs this shamir. So he asks a couple of demons. He says, they say, I don't know. I'm so sorry. We don't know where the shamir is. But you know who does know is Ashmedai, prince of the demons. He definitely knows where it is. And so he says, great, thank you so much. Where can I find Ashmedai? They said to him, and this is what's on your slide, he is in such and such a place, right? He's over there. So they say, okay, how am I going to know? How will I recognize it? And the demons respond. I'm going to read this word for word. He has dug a well and filled it with water and covered it with a large flint rock and sealed it with his seal. Every day, he ascends to the heavenly academic session and learns the heavenly Torah lesson, and then descends to the earthly academic session and learns the earthly Torah lesson, and then he inspects his seal and covers the well and drinks and covers it and leaves. Okay, so Ashmedai literally spends his days learning Torah. Because he's a demon and he sort of is in this intermediate space, he can go up or down as the case may be. And so he spends his mornings learning Torah in God's yeshiva. And then he comes down for the rest of the day to learn Torah in the rabbi's yeshiva, a human yeshiva, presumably with other people who are studying Torah. So King Solomon then sends a messenger to capture Ashmedai. And through a complicated series of events, Ashmedai is taken hostage and brought to Solomon. And over the course of that story, Ashmedai shows that he can quote biblical verses, he follows Jewish law, he recognizes God as his only master, and to be honest, he has more insight into human nature, reality, fate, and biblical interpretation than the humans in the story, including King Solomon. Ashmedai, and I think we see this most clearly in this one part. So after the temple is built, because Ashmedai told Solomon where the shamir was, but Solomon refused to release him, they're having a conversation that, like, literally, this was the only picture that made sense to me as I was reading this part of the story. Solomon said to Ashmedai, "It's written, God is like the Toafot Re'im." And we explained, like the Toafot, these are the ministering angels, and Re'im, these are the demons, right? Here are ways that God is greater than us. He's like angels, he's like demons. How are you greater than us? Ashmedai said to Solomon, remove the chains from me and give me your ring, and I will show you my greatness. Now, at this point, right, this is where this image is coming in. This is from Star Wars, but like, clearly don't do that, Solomon. Don't take off his chains and give him your ring of authority. Like, just don't. What does Solomon do? Solomon removed the chain from him and gave him his ring. Ashmedai swallowed it, placed one wing in the heavens and the other wing on earth, and hurled Solomon a distance of 400 miles. Ashmedai then takes over the throne. And while Ashmedai eventually loses the throne, the rabbis disagree about whether or not Solomon was ever able to take his throne back. So here we have this like ultimate wise king, right? Solomon built the temple, who is outsmarted by Ashmedai. Ashmedai, who, to be clear, studies Torah, seems to be pretty Jewishly engaged, also doesn't like being held hostage for an unlimited amount of time. But I mean, what an interesting depiction of Ashmedai. Because again, if demons could be part of the rabbinic system, but we also know that they have these connections to the divine world, well, could they actually out-rabbi the rabbis? This story seems to suggest, actually, you know what, like maybe. Okay. I think we have time for a question or two about this bizarre story before we move on.
We have a general question about whether you're comfortable making the slides available to people after the talk. I will take the, yeah, go ahead. And then, yeah.
Go ahead.
I was gonna take the opportunity to say to everyone, I've mentioned this a few times in the chat, this is being recorded. It will go on YouTube, and there will be a link to the YouTube recording that goes in our follow-up email, along with information about where to purchase Dr. Ronis's book.
I have no problem sharing the slides, so that I'm happy to put those in the email as well, if that would be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, doesn't matter to me. I just think these things are cool. And if you want to take home, like literally take home, yeah. So here's the thing, right? Here's what we're seeing so far. Once demons are part of the halakhic system, they have the freedom to excel within it according to the same metrics as rabbis, right? Torah knowledge, religious authority, kingship. And I've seen no parallels, by the way, to this in Christian texts, Zoroastrian texts, or Muslim texts from the same time. So the rabbis are doing this thing that seems to really be the rabbis. They're not getting it from some other group.
Is that a comment on the power of Torah?
I think it is absolutely a comment on the power of Torah. And in fact, if you know rabbinic Torah, right, if you know all the rules about even numbers and you know all of that, the demons won't get you, right? They only get you if you don't follow the rabbi's teachings about demons. So to some extent, we might want to think about them as rabbinic enforcers. But I said I would end by talking about exorcism, and I want to make sure we get a couple of minutes to talk about exorcism. So this is the only story in the Talmud about exorcism. And for context, there's this whole story where an unnamed Roman emperor decrees that Jews are forbidden to keep the Sabbath and some other stuff. So a small group of rabbis journey to Rome to beg the emperor to reconsider his decree. Now, the story is set in Roman Palestine, but it's only shows up in Babylonian rabbinic texts. It's in Aramaic. It seems to be a Babylonian rabbinic tradition. This is not a historical account, just for context. So as they journey to Rome, they meet a fella named Ben Talamion. Ben Talamion went out to greet them. He said to them, "Do you want me to go with you?" Rabbi Shimon cried and said, "May a miracle occur." Sure. Ben Talamion went ahead and entered the body of the emperor's daughter. When Rabbi Shimon arrived there, he said, "Ben Talamion, leave. Ben Talamion, leave." And when they called him, he came out and left. The emperor said to them, "Ask for whatever you want." and go into the treasure house and take whatever you want. They went and found the letter on which the decrees were written. They took it and ripped it up. Okay, so this text doesn't tell us that Ben Talamion is a demon, but there are a couple of clues, right? So first of all, the fact that he can travel large distances in the blink of an eye, so he can go ahead. Second of all, the name leave is basically the ancient cross-religious exorcism formula for demons, right? Much like you might think about today, if you've seen any movies, right? The power of X compels you. This was the phrase back then. And then finally, the enters the body of the emperor's daughter is a pretty classic sort of riff on a part of demonology that the rabbis knew about from other cultures. But what the rabbis are doing here is literally performing an exorcism, right? Ben Talamion isn't an attacker. He's an ally. He's a member of the community who offers to help. And the only reason they do a possession / exorcism is as a performance, right? It's not real. It's being staged so that they can save the Jews, right? Ben Talamion is essentially helping the rabbis perpetuate Jewish beliefs and traditions in the face of a hostile Roman emperor. And that's remarkable. But it also kind of makes sense, because if demons aren't negative attackers and assailants, then why would they try to hijack people, right? I mean, that makes good sense to me. So I want to end by just pointing out that for the rabbis, what we're seeing here is a real shift in how they think about demons that is deeply connected, I would argue, actually to their theology, right? So they don't really have another choice. And here's what I mean by that. Zoroastrian rulers of the empire were dualistic. Good demons were creations of the good God. Evil demons were the creation of the evil God. But the rabbis are monotheists, and they believe that God created everything. So they essentially have three options. Option one, demons are bad and God created evil. Option two, God is good, but God doesn't control everything, and so demons come from somewhere else. Neither of those options is going to work for the rabbis. Option three, God is good, has created demons who are themselves, at the very least, not entirely evil. And for really helpful reasons of, important theological understanding, that's the option the rabbis pick. And I think when they do that, they model for us that with a little legal ingenuity, sometimes the spookiest creatures out there can actually become our friends. So that's where I will end it for now. And I will turn it to Rachel. What would you like to?
Are you up for one more question?
I'm up for one more question, absolutely.
And I realize, Dr. Onus, your training and expertise is in the Talmud, but people are wondering and asking, and I thought this would be good to put at the end, about the afterlife of demons in Jewish tradition in the medieval period, in the modern period. Do we have the same sense that they are not wholly good, not wholly bad, can be brought under the umbrella of the rabbinic system? How dangerous are they? How prevalent are they? Any general comments about demons in the post-Talmudic Jewish world?
Yes. So one of the things that is really, really interesting is that in the medieval period, Maimonides, following Rabbi Isaac Alfasi, essentially argues that demons in the Talmud aren't real, that it's superstition and not really part of Jewish theology. And I would argue that he makes that case, and he actually convinces, right? He sort of convinces folks, okay, demons in the Talmud aren't real. So then people don't go say, demons aren't real. What they actually do is they say, okay, demons in the Talmud aren't real, but I bet those Christian or Muslim demons, depending on where I live, are. So Jews continue to have demonologies after Maimonides, but they're not demonologies based in the Talmud. So if you have traditions of evil demons, demons who are possessing people, all of that, that largely you'll find in the post-medieval period. Yeah.
So Maimonides killed it.
Maimonides seems to have largely killed Talmudic demons.
Uh-huh.
But demons, I mean, quite frankly, it's our loss because they sound delightful.
Well, somewhat.
I mean, I don't know. In some ways. And I want to be clear, right? Like sometimes good things are scary, right? Being scary, being powerful aren't themselves signs that you're evil.
So is anyone
Right?
dressing up as a Talmudic demon for Halloween tonight? Let us know in the comments. All right, Dr. Ronas, I think we're gonna leave it there. Thank you so much for these really surprising, interesting, and unexpected, I guess that goes with surprising texts, and introducing us to the Talmudic way of thinking about these interesting little creatures. And just as a reminder to everybody, we will send out a follow-up email. The recording will be there. A link to where you can purchase Dr. Ronas's book with a discount code will be there. We'll send a link to the slides as well. And if you enjoyed learning from Dr. Ronas and you are not part of our regular Daf Yomi Talmud study, which she is one of our beloved teachers, I will send out information about that as well if you would like to learn more with her about the Talmud generally in that way. So thank you for a great discussion. Thank you for a great presentation. And thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.